Hey again, Owen. It's great to be here with you. To our viewers, I am here with Owen Hockey today from Empress Brokers. I'm Leslie August, Fractional Chief Marketing Officer. And we're doing a series of short interviews about him and his business, his specialty in international and domestic sourcing. And for this particular segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the types of sourcing projects that you can help with. Do you want to elaborate on it? I think you've got like four different categories of sourcing on your website. Talk a little
Mm.
bit about how you look at those and what kinds of sourcing you help people with.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. We do sourcing across a pretty wide range of product categories, mostly consumer goods. We do some raw materials. We don't do design work, so we're not doing actual product design. Most of the clients that come to us, they already have a product that's designed, or they may be doing private labeling. Or they're looking for a specific kind of off the shelf product, that may be wood boards or it may be a certain kind of screw. We do have a number that have specific designs, that they've already made, they've been produced. They know the process, and then we're able to go out and identify the appropriate manufacturer or supplier, for their goods. And that's really where we excel and what our service is, going and, finding the appropriate manufacturer or supplier to achieve the goals of our clients.
Mhm.
And that process takes a lot of time. If anyone has, went to go find a new supplier, there's a lot of information out there. Even if you're just looking for a new supplier or manufacturer in the US, for example. And we do a lot of USA based, manufacturer search and supplier search for our clients. There's a lot of options out there, and some of them aren't in the public realm. Where do you go? Are you diving into phone books? We've done that before. Are you going to trade associations? Are you just Googling it? Are you using ThomasNet if you're, going in the US? That's a big directory. There's some outside of those different platforms, and it's really a lot of time that needs to be spent to go and do that identification process, and then communication with those suppliers. And we do all kinds of different, products, anything from toys. We've done different, stuffed animals and squeeze toys. I've done construction materials, wood molding, doors, also electronics, air conditioners, refrigerators, and all kinds of different products like that. I've even done some life-size animatronic animals before, which is an interesting one. And I love the fun ones. A lot of interesting products that we were for fitness equipment's one we're working on with a
Yeah.
couple of clients right now. And really it's, aligning with what their goals are and where they want to source it from. But that's the space we're in. We don't do, electronic design, and we're not in that space. We're not engineers, but we can work with them if needed.
So you will source internationally
Mhm.
if that's makes sense for the client, domestically if that makes sense for the client. You will work with them if they're trying to near shore,
Mhm.
right? And so you're pretty flexible in terms of the sourcing needs that they have. You could pretty much get plugged in as a company's um, sort of uh, sourcing department, if you wanted, or an add-on to their sourcing department when they need more resources, or if
Mhm.
it's a newer company or a newer importer, you can fulfill all those various sourcing needs. And do you also help with inventory management?
Yeah, no, you nailed it there on our services. Basically, companies looking for a new product first time. They're like, say, hey, where can I find someone to manufacture, my specific product that I want? We'll go scout it out, with a
Mm-hmm.
global approach at first, seeing what those options are. And then, yeah, the companies that maybe they need a little bit of help with their, product sourcing procurement team, where we can go out and we can help them with that process, some extra eyes quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We're working around the clock to communicate with suppliers, to have those kind of conversations, get the quotation, narrow it down, negotiate price. We can definitely do that. And we do that for a lot of our clients right now on an ongoing basis. And then inventory management. Yes, we do actually with my partner that's based in my office here as well. His name is Joshua, and he does inventory management, has a career in inventory management, managing larger retail chains. And we can offer that solution for our clients as well, especially for our target kind of clients, these smaller, medium-sized businesses that are going through a process where they say, hey, we don't have a system in place where that's organized or that aligns with how do we align our supply with the demand. We can help in that and setting up a process that makes sense for them. And Joshua does all the stuff that I don't do, which is forecasting, category management, checking the profitability on products. But it totally is a good partnership there, because then we have a pretty strong communication between each other. He says, hey, we need to reduce costs on this specific product. And we can work together. And then our team on the sourcing side, we can go and say, hey, well, let's go try and negotiate that. Let's use some of our cost savings tactics there to get that margin up to 30%.
Right.
Likely do it. And then, but he provides that intel. And then, we can also do the tracking inventory and stuff remotely, or at least doing the counts. And that's a good partnership. And we can, integrate like that as well. Or, some companies that say, hey, we're running out of stock on this specific product, or there's a risk of it, we need to find an alternative supplier. I've done a lot of that work as well, even though it may not be from their main supplier. Maybe they just don't have the capacity. During COVID, when there was a lot of restrictions on production,
Right.
had a lot of companies we were going out doing kind of hot shot orders of equipment from other locations. We could kind of step in and identify what those opportunities are, and just add some capacity to their team to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I like the benefit of you and your inventory management partner being able to do a data-driven analysis with the inputs on an individual company's inventory to give them feedback, so that they're aware sooner rather than later of where they may need to change their strategy. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So, what new trends are there in sourcing, if any? I mean, is there anything that people are talking about? I know that you sometimes talk about Turkey as a viable sourcing partner. That was not one that I had heard of until you and I talked about it. Or are there other countries that you see emerging as viable sourcing partners, as alternatives to China, for instance?
Yeah. And that's, in the trend, I think that diversification is still quite strong.
Okay.
In terms of saying like, hey, let's go find some other countries for my product, that maybe outside of China, or even sometimes outside of Asia.
Yeah.
And particularly with a lot of these first time importers that we work with, sometimes surprised by, they're very adamant saying, hey, we want it from this country, or we want it from this region. And we're able to go and explore those opportunities for them. Sometimes there may or may not be options in the regions that are companies are looking for, but I think I see more companies saying that, hey, we want it specifically in this country or this region.
Interesting.
Or, exclude China on this for this product because we already have a manufacturer there. We want to find an alternative as kind of a backup.
Yeah.
There's a lot of disruptions over the past few years in supply chain. I think particularly with COVID restrictions, the tariffs in 2018 had an impact. People said, hey,
Right.
we can't have all of our eggs in one basket. And then COVID, I think, kind of like was another pound on that nail, or
Like the
whatever.
double whammy.
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, now we're not able to get product for, and I was firsthand at a lot of clients, dealing with that. And I think it was just kind of a, hey, we need to have an alternative here.
Yeah.
We have a supplier, maybe it's in all of our supplies coming from, China. Let's move 10% out or 20% out somewhere else. And
Yeah.
even, likewise, companies, I was working with one company that was, they were sourcing all their stuff from Russia. There was a manufacturer
Oh, wow.
right. And so it just goes to show you that, and it was a very specific product. And then the war with Ukraine happened, and they're unable to get the supply of their product, and they don't have an alternative or a backup. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, kind of no matter what country you're purchasing your goods from, you're going to run into risk, and so just diversifying that risk, I think, is really still the trend in product sourcing. I think the other trend that, and maybe I see this just because of my position, but more companies that want to purchase directly from the source or manufacturer, instead of going through a distributor or an agent.
Oh, yeah.
And I think a lot of that's also, I mean, a lot of that's driven for cost control and transparency, but also with different laws and regulations coming out in the US, or initiatives kind of pushing that transparency and full understanding of your supply chain. You're required to understand where all the raw materials came from,
Right.
for your product. So if I'm importing plush toys, I should really understand, where the cotton came from, where the polyester came from, where the plastic eyes came from, who's the supplier to that for compliance. So I see more companies, and I always encourage companies, go get a clear bill of materials, understand the cost for each of those, who's the supplier, who's their supplier. You see that in solar panels, for example. It's required. You have to go and do that. You have to understand where the silica comes from. But even in consumer goods, it's kind of a responsibility now for the importer to have that full understanding. It's hard to do that if you're going through a distributor or an agent.
Right.
They may not be willing to do that. You're just going through another messenger.
Right,
So,
another layer, or intermediary.
Doing that yourself, you're taking full responsibility for it. And then also, environmental impact, and where is this actually coming from? How do we audit the suppliers of the fabric? Are they using the dye like they say, or just that, making that push for transparency? That's the diversification, and the push for direct relationship to get the transparency.
Okay, so the two takeaways from this conversation really are people that are the companies that are looking at diversification of their supply chain, which may not be the cheapest way to do it, but it balances the risk of sourcing from a single source against the cost of diversification, and that there's got to be some balance there. Otherwise, you could run into a situation like many importers did, with being too reliant on their Chinese supplier, or your example of the company too reliant on a single Russian supplier, which then dried up. And then combine that with the need for understanding and transparency into your own supply chain, which is harder and harder the more intermediaries there are. So you're saying importers that used to use agents maybe are not using agents as much. Maybe importers who started out with a simple drop shipping model are no longer using that simple drop shipping model, because you don't really know where what you're getting is coming from, and really what's in it. So two great observations.
And I just wanted,
Go ahead.
didn't respond to your question about, Turkey. That's a good example where, there's options there in terms of, manufacturing capacity in certain areas. We've done a lot of exploration there for clients and helped some clients find manufacturers that worked out in Turkey. And, that's one example where we had a, company that wanted to find an alternative for their products, even though they may not be purchasing from them right away, but at least to understand what the costs are, establish a relationship there and explore that, and then continue to negotiate the pricing down. And that one of that was for construction materials that they were, so an Asia supplier or China-based supplier, and then also one in Turkey that was manufacturing there. That Turkey's prices were higher, quite a bit higher, but there's room to negotiate with them, and it is an alternative supplier, so that they're not totally out of luck if they run into some kind of supply chain hurdle, kind of slowly establishing that relationship there. And just exploring those other alternatives for our clients. Luggage is another one where we found a manufacturer in Turkey that made sense for one of our clients.
Interesting.
No, a lot of the components are still coming from China. That's the reality of it. Plastic injection, if you're looking at any kind of electronics components, but some of the final assembly, vacuum forming, things like that, maybe they're doing that in Turkey or the other location, and adding a lot of value into that product. But some of those components, that's why you always got to check the actual country of origin. That's where the customer background and that kind of help comes into play. Verify, is this actually a origin of Turkey, or is most of it coming from China?
From
Every
China.
different, right? So
Yeah.
that's where kind of a trap that new importers can fall into. They say, hey, this is a product of Turkey, but no, it's not. It's actually country of origin China. So that's something we can also help companies keep an eye on and understand before they make their order.
Great, great. Thank you. We're going to end this segment, and we'll pick up, and I know you've got an interesting take on your top 5 tips for reducing costs in sourcing and logistics. So we'll do that next. Thank you for now, and thanks to the viewers out there. We hope this has been helpful.
Thanks, Leslie.